Hello and welcome back to Channel 7th Blue Star. This is Mr. Ed Windhorse, aka Sri Edvardo, here to share with you the second of a three-part series dealing with trauma. I haven't exactly been able to come up with this second part as quickly as I may have hoped I could. Last broadcast I said I'd be back in another day, and it's been a little more than a day, so that's just a function of how long it took me to consciously form uh, the rest of this lesson. So I think you'll like what I have to say today and tomorrow, and that's all that counts. So actually, it's not what I say, it's what your heart's saying inside. And let's start there, inside, where your heart is, or your center of being, not figuratively your heart, but right there, right behind your lower part of your sternum. That's kind of the point of your center of mass in the physical terminology, physics terminology. Uh, a lot, a lot can be said for that region of your body, what it can produce when you elevate the energy that radiates from that part of your body. As we've mentioned before, chi, prana, life force, spirit, consciousness, it all rests in a quantum reality in your center of mass. Uh, it's basically everything that travels at the speed of light and quicker because it is of light origin. So we left it off last time talking about trauma, and the best way I've deduced explaining how trauma can be dealt with uh, is somewhat of an analogy, because that's probably the best way for most people to relate to it personally. So figure each of us humans experiences trauma in our life at one point or another, as we discussed last time. Uh, and naturally, when humans are exposed to trauma or are traumatized by some perpetrator, might not actually be a person, creating the trauma. Anyway, whatever creates the trauma causes our primal beings, our physical beings, to naturally want to retract from whatever's creating the trauma. So naturally, uh, it's a form of retreat, but it's not a it's a self-preservation mode. It's not a weakness. Okay, it's a natural thing to retreat. So say we've experienced some kind of trauma as humans. We want to find a nice place to hide to keep us from experiencing more trauma. Sometimes we look for a dark place to hide, because if we hide in a dark place, we're hoping we can't be seen by whatever's causing the trauma, or we think we are far enough away from it in retreat that it won't affect us. So the trauma occurs, figuratively speaking, and we retreat into some hole in the wall or some quiet, dark, good hiding place. Okay, so we're in that dark hiding place, waiting for the outside trauma to pass. And as we sit in this position of retreat and contemplation, our eyes start to adjust to the lessened volume of light. You go into a cave, say that's where we wound up, trying to get away from the trauma. So we're in a cave, and our eyes are adjusting to the low light volume. And pretty soon our eyes adjust to the low light, and we're able to look around in the cave. And lo and behold, the cave keeps going back into the mountain or the earth or whatever it's been made of. So we start to explore the cave as we're waiting for the trauma outside to pass. We get further and further into the cave. We find a maze of tunnels, and we see that most of these tunnels were created probably by forms of rushing water. And we realize if we go further back into the cave, we might find some of this water to help sustain us while we wait out the trauma outside. So we go deeper and deeper into the cave looking for water because we're thirsty in our cave. And we need water to survive, right? So we're back there in the cave. We find some puddles of water. We hear rushing water, but we're not quite sure we want to go that far into the cave yet. So we find some puddles of water, have a few sips out of the cup of our hand. And as we look back out to the tunnel cave entrance, we realize that the light is getting dimmer and dimmer in comparison to how much more light there seemed to be at the entrance of the cave. So here we are sitting back in this cave, and the light at the end of the tunnel kind of scenario seems to be diminishing. And lo and behold, as we retreat further and further into the safety of a non-lit cave, we realize the light at the end of the tunnel is diminishing. So the interesting thing is, as we retreat into the light of the tunnel, the non-light of the tunnel that is, our eyes adapt more and more to less light. As a consequence, we realize as we get out closer to the opening of the cave that the light can be a little too bright. If we go out too quickly, our eyes need time to adjust to the light as we move back out of the cave. Well, it's probably a good idea not to go running out of the cave in that scenario, or we'd be blinded by the light, literally, as we come out to the cave opening. So many of us, as we're contemplating and waiting for outside trauma to pass, remain in the cave for extended periods of time. This can actually be quite beneficial if we are interested in understanding a different source of light energy that's available to us to see things in our newly found darker environment. And instead of an outside light shining into the cave, we realize with our eyes shut in the stillness of the cave, we realize there is some kind of light energy inside of us, and it's coming from this center area in our solar plexus. And we're curious about that, so we keep thinking about that light and the more we think about it and realize its existence, the brighter it gets. It's beautiful, really, because the more we go in with our eyes shut, the more we see that light can really be pumped up. That's basically what the meditative state does to us, for us, by us. It helps us go within and pump up that light energy that's within us. So there's nothing wrong with going into a cave, finding a nice place of solace, because wonderful things can happen in the cave. Very rarely are there boogeymen or monsters that are going to eat you. That is an illusion that our egos put up to keep us from going into that cave and exploring the light that's within ourselves. So be brave, find yourself, find your inner light, and you'll never be afraid of the dark. So the dark is not necessarily a bad thing. There's such things that we see out in our cosmos with our wonderful new observation tools, telescopes that are out there in space, not stuck here on our planet, and the ones out in space can see far deeper into the cosmos. Anyway, what they see in these telescopes out in our cosmos is something that has been termed dark matter and dark energy. Dark energy creates dark matter in its own way. So let's just think of dark energy. Dark energy is not evil, folks. It's not the devil. It's not something bad, because it's something that we need to experience to overcome our fear of. That's how we find our inner light. So it seems that this dark energy out there in our cosmos, we call it that because it's not lit up, right? It's interesting. Dark energy is just something that hasn't been lit up yet. There's still something there. In fact, my understanding of dark energy and dark matter, it's a different type of dimension. It represents everything that is actually moving faster than the speed of light. And that's why we don't see it. That's why it's dark. Anyway, I don't want to go too far out there, out into our cosmos at the moment. Let's come back into where we are in our cave. So we're not so afraid of the dark. Realizing we have an inner light. And realizing that we can turn that inner light up the further we go into the cave and the darker it gets. We can adapt, right? So trauma, in a way, has actually helped us to find an inner energy in ourselves, our chi, our prana, our life force, an energy within us that can be represented as a light energy. All energies are forms of light. Some forms of light we can't see. Some forms of light energy we only feel or hear. Anyway, as humans, we have a very wide visible spectrum of light, and that's most likely what supplies our physical being with the sustenance it needs. All the food we eat we are ingesting some form of light energy that's been converted, whether through photosynthesis or whatever. What we eat is a function of the light that what we are eating grew on. So as important as it is for us to be in the light, our physical bodies, we realize that we can't stay in the cave forever, realizing and understanding our inner light. Our physical bodies actually need to slowly work our way out of the cave back into the physical light that we see, and then our bodies are nourished again and we continue to live. The point being here is we can't stay in the cave the whole time, whether we're meditating and just experiencing incredible inner light, brighter than anything we've experienced outside the cave. We still must venture back out of the tunnel of the cave into the physical light because our bodies need it to survive. So, when we've overcome our fear of the darkness by lighting up our inner energies, which are very much like nuclear energies inside of us, because the energy is created by a fusion process inside of us, not a fission process, meaning that we are fusing particles together to create something new in our consciousness, and then there is energy released as a function of that fusion process, and that is released as light. That's how the sun works. Fission, on the other hand, that we use for nuclear bombs and nuclear energy production, is actually splitting the atom and yielding all the energy that is released from the atom being split. What I'm talking about is actually putting two particles together under very high pressure of consciousness and thought, and watching what happens as we compress it further and further down to a point of singularity, if you will, much like what happens in black holes. So, there's nothing wrong with retreating from trauma. It's natural. We need to do it to survive. But we must remember, as we find the beauty and the quiet and the solitude of retreat, that to enjoy fully what we have experienced in the retreated position, when we're getting to know our inner energy, we think, wow, now that I have expanded my inner energy and consciousness, I wonder if that will change how the world looks when I step back out into the light. So, that's kind of like a born-again experience when you come back out into the light, because you're experiencing things completely differently, because you've seen something in yourself that helps you perceive the outside world more beautifully. So, I get emotional talking about this because it's life-changing moment, and we can, once we tap into that, we realize its infinite nature, and we can become much fuller human beings. I think that's why we're here. Many of my teachers have talked about it, and you can't really understand it by someone talking about it until you've experienced it. Many people have experienced it in the dream state. not actually the wakened state. That's great. That's the first step. Your dream state is oftentimes just a precursor to what you're going to live when you wake up. So, as one of my old bike racing buddies used to say, I don't think he realized what he was saying, but don't be scared. Don't be scared. You know, whenever you walk in a situation, just shine your inner light on it, your inner energy, and it won't look so scary. To close this quick little session here, we've got, oh geez, already 20 minutes. Okay. I'm going to maybe tape the second part of this tonight to make up for having missed yesterday. So I hope you've been able to hear what I've said. I know my voice might have gotten quiet. Turn up the volume, put on the headphones, whatever it takes. In parting here, I want to share something that came to me just in the last couple hours. Music and sound, being energy, is also a form of light. Since I'm in my 5th decade, I've listened to a lot of good music and been moved by it. Some people actually see colors when they close their eyes and listen to music. This is because they're relating to an energy that's radiating from the music. Similarly, songs such as "This Old Light of Mine," "Song Remains the Same." I mean, there's a lot of songs relating to light in various forms. In fact, the Led Zeppelin song, "The Song Remains the Same," may be viewed as the song that they're talking about, remaining the same, is the light song. It's constant. It remains the same. It's a wonderful energy source, all light energy. And it heals you from the inside out. And when you learn how you can heal yourself from the inside out and how that process works, well, the micro energies that are rushing around in us that we see when we have big fancy computer scans at the hospital, they're looking at the energy. That's how they distinguish tissues and all that. It's the energy that those tissues emit. So, "Song Remains the Same" is about light energy, and it remains the same because our sun has remained the same since we've been able to relate to it. And I'm not saying everyone go worship the sun, but really our physical bodies need the sun and the energy to sustain our physical selves. And the other half of that equation of human sustenance is what sustains our spirit and our energy and our chi and our prana and our life force, whatever you want to call it, and that's the inner light. And we'll just leave it at that for now. So we'll talk more about how the healing process of light works and what happens when we don't address it, don't realize it's there, how that can lead us further back into the tunnel of darkness until we don't even see any light at the end of the tunnel, and then fear sets in, thinking, wow, have I lost my way? Will I be able to ever find the light again? And that's a life-changing moment too. Some people have a hard time figuring out if they ever can find the light again, but we are able to. Every single one of us are able to find the light again and figure out how to harness it. That's the redemptive property of us as humans, realizing the energy and the light all around us and inside us, and how to use those two energies in harmony uh, to be happy, truly happy. So I'll toast with a little I'm fit tea. For all people over 50, you know what I mean. I'm fit tea. Fit tea? Get it? Okay. So here's to you. Tune in to the second half, or the third part of this trilogy, which is quite interesting and enlightening. That's what you're here for, folks. See you soon.